Hi, I'm Susan Clare, GourmetQuilter, because quilting is delicious. We're going to have a little bit of fun today. We're going to be making some blocks using up really some 2.5 inch strips. They could be any colours. I've picked some colours that I had some strips of there to work with, but you could have it multicolour, you could work within certain colours. Anyway, I'll just show you how I've gone ahead. So the block we're making is like this really. It's just some strips going one way and they join on the diagonal. So I'll show you a way that I've come up with that I think works really well for doing these sort of blocks. You need 2 sets of 3 2.5 inch strips joined together. So I've got a sort of greeny set and an orangey yellowy set here, but as I said, colours are up to you. What I've done is joined the 3 strips. They were full width strips, but I've cut some off already to make the sampling. And so your centre strip, you want to press the seams into the centre on one of the groupings and to the sides on the other groupings, so that when we put them together, right sides together, those seams will then nestle so that these ones are coming in and those are going out, so that they'll just sit nicely together. So if you join up 2 sets of strips, that will give you 10 of these sort of blocks like this. So I've gone ahead, I've joined up my 2 sets of strips, I've pressed my seams, and now we just need to trim them. So we're going to, instead of cutting squares, I'm just going to trim off that end so that it's got a nice straight edge. And I use my board a bit for this sort of cutting. You want to make sure your edges are sitting together, and you should be able to see that or feel that your seams are sitting together as the strips go along. So try and keep things lined up with the board is a really good way to do things at this stage. And then you want to cut. So this is 6.5 inches wide because it's our 3 strips, 2.5 inch wide strips joined together. We want to cut these pieces now at 7.5 inches. So I've come along here 7.5 inches, and because of things are lined up nicely with the board, I can now line my ruler up with the markings on my board and cut at 7.5 inches. And I can go along and I can cut all of them at 7.5 now if I want to. And so I can do another one here. And so you'll get 5 of these sets out of a strip. You will have a little bit left over, which you could use for some other delicious project. I'll just cut these at the moment. I want to make sure that my strips are sitting so that the seams are sitting nicely together, and they seem to be. Everything is sitting pretty well straight. So most boards have a diagonal line. And I'm going to use that to help us mark now, because this is 6.5 now by 7.5. And we're going to do 2 seams. And we want to do it as if it was a square. We want a diagonal line. So I found that by lining up my corner here, so that I've got a diagonal line coming right through, I can draw that diagonal line to here. And this is why it's longer than it is wide, because it's not just working with the square. We want to get 2 squares that are still 6.5 inches. So that's one seam that I'm going to sew there. But before I go ahead and sew it, I'm going to turn that around without moving the fabrics themselves, so that everything is still sitting together nicely. And through this point now, I'm going to draw another diagonal line. And so that comes out here. So by lining everything up, that diagonal line that's on the board, they're so useful, these lines on the board. I can line that up and I can draw my second line of sewing there. And we're going to cut between them. Now that's a little bit more than 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we can trim that down just a little bit as well. So now it's just a matter of sewing, and you could get several ready and do the chain piecing. I'm just going to do this one this time. So your seams should be sitting quite nicely because we've done all that positioning. So just sewing on that drawn line. And then we want to do the second line as well. So by doing that extra inch to make it a rectangle rather than a square when we sliced these units up, it just allows us a little bit of room to move, and we don't have to worry too much about some exact measurements. So what we can do now is cut 1/4 inch away between the 2 seam lines from the first seam line You could, as I said, just cut it in half and it's a slightly larger seam allowance. I like to stick with my 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I turn the other piece around and trim off the other one. And you're just trimming off about 1/4 inch excess there, which is not really very much to waste, I don't think. And then we just need to press them. Now you could press the seams open, I press them to one side. So this can look, as I said, great in multicolours. You could do one set of strips, like I've more or less done some yellows here and some sort of borderline greens on that side. And that will allow you to come up with different layouts and things as well. So what you have now is 2 6.5 inch units from a 6.5 by 7.5 inch strips in pairs like that. And then you can have a lot of fun playing with your different colours, playing with the different way you put things together, by keeping 2 colours, like one colour on one side and one colour on the other, which means that one set of strips is one colour and one another. You can kind of end up with some diagonal lines. You can move things around. You could do light and dark, you could do blacks and whites, you could do pretty much anything you like. So I just thought it was a great way of using up some 2.5 inch strips that could be random colour placements, rather than necessarily all super organised. We often have some left over from other projects. So that was just a little idea that I had using some 2.5 inch strips. I'll just pin this one up so we can see that all together. And it's fairly quick and easy. As I said, you'll get 10 of these blocks from 2 sets of strips. So from 6 strips you'll get 10 6.5 inch blocks. And then you can put them all together however you choose and make a quilt using that. So that was an idea with some 2.5 inch strips. Thank you.